awesome story, man. And I mean, it's so many people's stories on some level. And even if someone hasn't been arrested, I think we can all relate to numbing out in some way, shape, or form, right? And we're all recovering from something, as you like to say. So, what is recovery in your opinion? And what is particular about your recovery model, if you will, like how you see recovery, where you kind of overlap with maybe traditional 12 steps or something like that versus what you do on a regular basis with, your trauma informed approach, kind of share some goods on that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for asking that because it's an important question because I did come from a traditional 12-step model because when you're arrested and you're in a federal court and they're saying, "Okay, you better not do anything. No alcohol, no drugs, nothing." They're also
Yeah.
saying, "Here's a therapist we're going to provide you and here's 12-step meetings you can go to." That's their subscription for recovery. So the prescription for recovery in the court system is 12-step meetings and maybe a therapist that they'll pay for. That's it. So they're not going to pay for any other types of treatment. So it's like go to these meetings, and that's what I did, and get your paper signed. And I did that for many years, and it was very helpful. And I met amazing because the power of the 12-step community is the community. And then when
Mhm.
you get into that, you learn about the principles that are inside of the 12 steps. And there's a lot of powerful, universal, ancient wisdom inside of those 12 steps, but it's another tool. So it's not an end all be all. That's a tool. And so I started to work through those. I started to help others through that. I gained a community of people. And I never had that. I never had like true authentic friendships with
Mhm.
men. I started
Mhm.
gaining that. And then with women and started to have these deep, intimate relationships. And eventually what happens is it starts to evolve. Evolution is a guarantee. So it's like I was evolving and I was starting to becoming more entrepreneurial in nature. So I started to look towards breath work. I started to look towards self-regulation skills. I started to look towards things that are like cold therapy. Cold therapy became this super powerful catalyst for me 2015, where I just was like addicted in many ways to the power of the endorphin rush and the resilience factor and the confidence I got coming out of a cold shower or a cold plunge. And so these are things that I started to bring in. So when we talk about recovery, it could be 100 different tools we're talking about. 12 steps is one of them. The power of the
Mhm.
community, or some would call it the fellowship, is another one. But these are all vital for societal well-being. Never mind just recovery. Feel like being tribal, having values and
Mhm.
principles we live by. Like these are
Mhm.
these are important, I think, for humanity. But yes, in the recovery community, they exist for some and not for all. So I think, for me, as I evolved into this recovery space, we can kind of go into this you know, is finding all these ways to try to reach these deep causal emotions and trauma that I couldn't
Mhm.
reach just by sitting in a meeting or by talking to a friend. Like when I started to get into the body, like as they say, the body keeps the score. That famous
Mhm.
book. It's like
Mhm.
Bessel van der Kolk. You end up having this like visceral reaction where you realize the issues are in the tissues, and you start to have these experiences. But it took me many years to get to that place.
Hmm. Beautiful. And I mean, we've had a couple of folks on the show where we've talked about the body keeps the score, and these sorts of concepts, because it's always interesting to like kind of bridge the gap with someone who's maybe a little bit more versed in these topics to someone who maybe is a little bit new to these ideas, when they say, oh, trauma is what's leading to your addiction, or in general trauma is leading to your dysregulation of your nervous system, or whatever people like to say about it. There's always kind of the critic who might say, I didn't have any trauma. I had a great childhood, Jesse. What are you talking about? Um, I know other people who have had tremendous traumas and were sexually abused or physically abused, or, their father left them, or whatever. These big things, moments happened in their lives. But, my life has been great. So what would you say to someone like that who feels like, man, I still find myself in addictive patterns, but maybe I don't identify as having trauma? What would you say to that?
Yeah, and that's very common, right? I mean, a lot of
Mhm.
people in the entrepreneur world and the worlds that I'm in, that's like, well, I never had any trauma. But then when I get to know them and
Mhm.
they start to talk to me, I'm like, brother or sister, that's trauma. Like when they start to share with me that their best friend moved away at 10, or their parents split at 7 and divorced. Like, this is trauma. You just don't look at it as trauma because the world never gave you a definition of trauma that actually made sense to you. So, in many ways, we no, there's not many. We all have trauma. Like we do.
Mhm.
It's just what is trauma? How do we define trauma? And for some, it's like, no, I just got through that. But how did you really get through it? What defensive coping mechanisms did you use? And then as you get to know someone, you can start to pick them up. And those things are still playing out today. And they actually built a whole business around those. And so that became the catalyst behind their success, is avoiding the pain that they didn't even realize they had because they didn't even know that they had trauma. So I think that that's what I would say to someone, is just get curious about yourself.
Mm.
Get curious of why things trigger you. Why do things how come this doesn't affect me but it affects you when I say these things? And that can start to reveal these deeper layers. And I would say, for sure, though, I do believe that we all have trauma passed on from
Mhm.
generations before us.
Yeah, I mean that's beautiful. You mentioned something about the 12 steps and having powerful, universal, ancient wisdom. You're talking about trauma being passed on, from generations before us. It seems like in some ways there's a little bit of a metaphysical um, lens. I don't obviously want to put that necessarily on you. I want you to speak to whether you would adopt that concept or not. But like, it feels like maybe you have some spiritual concepts as well that play into this. How does this work, and your spiritual worldview kind of connect the dots and to the here and now and the practical process of healing? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I've been really graced with incredible mentors and incredible coaches in my life that have helped me in those areas, because,
Mm,
as when you're even if you're not an entrepreneur, coaching is a very beautiful thing. When I was in Verizon, I hired a coach, and it made no sense, and no one even told me to do it. My intuition did.
mm,
And then eventually I left that company to continue to follow my intuition with also my mind and my intellect, and while having a coach. And so I say that because at one point I also hired a spiritual coach.